The sound of hoofbeats thundered behind Penelope Zimmerman as she pushed her stolen mare harder, the animal's labored breathing matching her own desperate gasps. The bounty hunter was gaining on her, she could feel it, and the vast expanse of Wyoming territory stretched before her like an endless prison yard rather than the freedom she'd sought. Her bruised hands clutched the reins tighter as blood from the bullet graze on her arm soaked through her sleeve, the pain nothing compared to what awaited if she was caught and returned to St. Louis. The year was 1878, and Penelope had decided death was preferable to one more day as Reginald Wellington's wife. Her horse stumbled on the rocky terrain, nearly sending her flying. The animal recovered, but precious seconds had been lost. She glanced back, her heart seizing at the sight of the lone rider silhouetted against the setting sun. 3 days of running, and still he followed. Wellington's money had clearly purchased persistence. The landscape changed as she rode west, scrubland giving way to rolling foothills. Ahead, a stand of pines provided potential cover. Penelope veered toward them, praying for a miracle. Her prayer came in the form of a ravine hidden from view until she was nearly upon it that cut a jagged line through the earth. Without hesitation, she guided her horse down the steep embankment, hooves sliding on loose stones. At the bottom, she pressed forward through the narrow passage, the walls rising high on either side. The sound of pursuit faded, but she didn't slow. Night was falling, and she needed distance. When the ravine widened into a small valley, Penelope finally allowed her exhausted mount to slow to a walk. The valley opened before her, revealing a creek lined with cottonwoods and, in the distance, the silhouette of a small cabin nestled against the backdrop of mountains. Smoke curled from its chimney. Penelope hesitated, torn between seeking help and avoiding human contact. Her supplies were nearly gone, her wound needed tending, and the horse couldn't continue much longer. Decision made, she approached cautiously. A dog's bark shattered the stillness, followed by the creak of a door. A tall figure emerged from the cabin, rifle in hand. Penelope froze. "Who's there?" A man's voice, deep and steady. "Please," Penelope called, hating the weakness in her voice. "I need help." The man advanced, his features becoming clearer in the fading light. Broad-shouldered and bearded, with a weathered face that suggested he was in his early 30s. His eyes narrowed as he took in her appearance, the men's clothing she'd stolen, the blood on her sleeve, her obvious exhaustion. "You're hurt," he said, lowering his rifle slightly. "I'm being followed," she replied, fighting to stay upright in the saddle. "A bounty hunter." Something flickered across his face. Caution, perhaps, or suspicion. "What did you do?" Penelope swayed, darkness edging her vision. "I left my husband." The last thing she saw before collapsing was the look of surprise on the stranger's face as he rushed forward to catch her. When Penelope awakened, she was lying on a narrow bed, covered with a rough woolen blanket. Her wound had been cleaned and bandaged, her dirty clothes replaced with an oversized shirt. Panic flared until she realized her undergarments remained untouched. The cabin was silent save for the crackle of a fire in the stone hearth. She sat up slowly, wincing at the pain in her arm. The interior was simple but tidy: a table with 2 chairs, shelves stocked with supplies, a trunk at the foot of the bed. The rich aroma of coffee filled the air. The door opened and the bearded man entered, bringing with him the scent of horses and open air. He paused upon seeing her awake. "Good morning," he said, setting down a bundle of firewood. "Wasn't sure you'd make it through the night. Fever had a good hold." Penelope's hand went to her forehead, finding it cool. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Nash." Samuel Nash. He poured coffee into a tin mug and brought it to her. "Most folks call me Sam." She accepted the mug gratefully. "Penelope Zimmerman." "Well, Mrs. Zimmerman." "Miss," she interrupted sharply. "Or Penelope. Not Mrs." Sam raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. Penelope then. Your horse is resting in the barn. She's near spent, but she'll recover. And the man who was following me? No sign of anyone yet. He settled into a chair, studying her. Want to tell me why a bounty hunter's after you for leaving your husband? Penelope sipped the coffee, strong and black. My husband is Reginald Wellington. His family owns half of St. Louis, including the judges and police. She met Sam's gaze directly. He accused me of theft when I left. It's easier than admitting his wife ran away. Did you? Steal from him? Only what was rightfully mine to begin with. She touched the locket hidden beneath the borrowed shirt. And my mother's jewelry. Sam considered this. Where were you headed? San Francisco. I have a distant cousin there. She'd never met this cousin, only exchanged a few letters, but it was her only hope. I have money enough for passage once I get to Sacramento. That's a long way yet. Sam stood and moved to the stove, where a pot of something bubbled. You need to rest that arm before traveling further. I can't stay. If he finds me, my place isn't easy to find, and I know every approach. He spooned stew into a bowl. Eat. We can talk after. Penelope wanted to argue, but exhaustion and hunger won out. She ate while Sam busied himself with chores, moving with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to self-reliance. Despite her wariness, she found herself studying him. His hands were calloused but gentle, his movements economical. The cabin spoke of a solitary life, yet it felt more like a home than the grand mansion she'd fled. How long have you lived here? She asked when he returned to take her empty bowl. 5 years. He sat again, stretching his long legs toward the fire. Built it myself. Alone? No family? A shadow crossed his face. Not anymore. Penelope recognized the pain behind those 2 words. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. He changed the subject. Your bounty hunter, what's he look like? Tall, thin face, black coat, a scar across his cheek. She shuddered. Cold eyes. Sam nodded. I'll keep watch. You should rest more. I've imposed enough. It's no imposition. His voice was firm. I don't leave wounded animals to fend for themselves. I certainly won't turn away a person in need. Penelope couldn't remember the last time someone had shown her kindness without expectation. Thank you, Mr. Nash. Sam, he corrected with the hint of a smile. Get some sleep, Penelope. You're safe here. As she drifted off, Penelope wondered if that could possibly be true. She'd stopped believing in safety the day she'd married Reginald Wellington. The next 3 days passed in a strange rhythm of recovery and watchfulness. Sam tended to his small herd of cattle and horses, repaired fences, and kept an eye on the approaches to his valley. Penelope's fever didn't return, and her arm began to heal. By the 4th day, she insisted on helping with chores, despite Sam's protests. I'm not invalid, she said, joining him as he gathered eggs from the small hen house. And I won't be a burden. Sam handed her the basket. Never said you were, but that arm needs time. Time is something I don't have in abundance. She looked toward the valley entrance. He'll be coming. Let him come, Sam said with quiet certainty. This is my land. Penelope studied him. In the days she'd spent at his cabin, she'd learned little about his past. He was educated, books lined his shelves, and he spoke well. He was skilled with horses and cattle, a crack shot with his rifle, and possessed the quiet confidence of a man who had made peace with solitude. Why did you help me? She asked suddenly. Sam collected the last egg before answering. Would you rather I hadn't? That's not what I asked. He straightened, his eyes meeting hers. I recognize running when I see it, and sometimes folks run for good reason. Before she could press further, his dog began to bark, not the friendly greeting it gave Sam, but a warning. Sam handed her the eggs and reached for the rifle that was never far from his side. "Get inside," he said quietly, "and stay away from the windows." Heart pounding, Penelope hurried to the cabin. Through the small side window, she watched Sam move toward the edge of the clearing, rifle ready but not raised. Minutes later, a rider appeared. Relief flooded through her. It wasn't the bounty hunter. This man was older, wearing a weather-beaten hat and the dust of long travel. Sam's posture relaxed as he recognized the visitor. Penelope moved to the door as the men approached the cabin. "Marshal Fletcher," Sam was saying, "didn't expect to see you out this way." The marshal, a grizzled man with sharp eyes, nodded to Penelope. "Miss, hope I'm not intruding?" "Not at all," Sam replied. "What brings you?" "Looking for a woman on the run. Bounty hunter came through town asking questions. Said she stole valuable property from her husband back east." The marshal's gaze was steady on Penelope. "Described someone matching your appearance, miss." Penelope's hand tightened on the doorframe. "I stole nothing that wasn't already mine." "Didn't say you did." The marshal dismounted slowly. "Mind if I come in? Been riding since dawn." Inside, over coffee, Marshal Fletcher explained his presence. "Man called Brock's been asking all over, offering good money for information. Says he's working for a Mr. Wellington from St. Louis." "And you came to tell Sam?" Penelope asked. "Came to warn you both." Fletcher looked at her directly. "Wellington's got connections. Federal judge in St. Louis issued papers claiming you took valuable property and fled. Makes it legal for Brock to bring you back." Sam's face hardened. "She's not going back." "Didn't say she should." Fletcher sipped his coffee. "But you should know Brock's got a reputation. Doesn't always bring folks back alive. Especially women who've given him trouble." Penelope felt cold despite the warm day. "He's killed before?" "Let's just say accidents happen around him." Fletcher set down his cup. "I've got no love for men who hunt women. Especially when those women are running from something worse." Sam leaned forward. "What are you suggesting, Marshal?" "Nothing official." Fletcher stood. "Just passing through, checking on an old friend. Haven't seen anyone matching the description." He adjusted his hat. "But if I were you, I'd consider moving on soon. Valley like this only has one way in and out." After the marshal left, Penelope paced the small cabin. "I have to go. I've put you in danger by staying." Sam watched her from the table. "Where will you go?" "Your horse still needs rest, and Brock knows you're heading west." "I don't know." She ran a hand through her hair. Loosened from its practical braid. "Maybe south into Colorado. Or north to Montana." "With winter coming? That's a death sentence for someone traveling alone." Sam stood and moved to the map he kept pinned to one wall. "There's a settlement about 40 miles northwest of here. Friend of mine has a place there. We could go together." Penelope stilled. "We?" "I've been thinking of moving on anyway." His tone was casual, but she sensed the lie. This cabin, this valley, they were his home, built with his own hands. "I won't let you uproot your life for me," she said firmly. Sam turned to her. "It's my choice. And right now, staying here puts us both at risk." "You barely know me." "I know enough." He held her gaze. "I know you're brave enough to leave everything behind. Smart enough to survive this long, and decent enough that Fletcher took your side without question." Penelope felt something shift between them, a recognition perhaps, or a decision made. "Why would you do this?" Sam's expression softened slightly. "Maybe I've been alone too long." The next morning, they began preparations. Sam had a second horse, a sturdy gelding named Rusty that could carry Penelope. Her mare would be used as a pack horse, carrying what supplies they could take. Sam worked methodically, choosing what to bring and what to leave behind. "We'll travel light," he told her. "Take the mountain pass instead of the main trail. Longer route, but less chance of being spotted." Penelope helped where she could, sewing extra pouches for provisions, preparing food for the journey. As she worked, she found herself watching Sam, the careful way he packed ammunition, the gentle handling of his horses, the occasional glance in her direction when he thought she wasn't looking. By evening, they were nearly ready. The tension of imminent departure filled the cabin as they shared what might be their last meal there. "What was she like?" Penelope asked suddenly. "Your wife." Sam's hand stilled on his cup. "What makes you think I had a wife?" "The way you look sometimes. And there are 2 rings in the small box by your bed." She hadn't meant to pry, but she'd seen them while gathering her few belongings. For a moment she thought he might not answer. Then he sighed. "Sarah. Her name was Sarah. We came out here together from Pennsylvania. Had dreams of building a cattle ranch." His eyes fixed on something distant. "She died in childbirth. Our son with her." "I'm sorry," Penelope said softly. "How long ago?" 7 years. He met her gaze. "You remind me of her sometimes. Not in looks, but in spirit." She never backed down from anything either. Before Penelope could respond, Sam's dog growled low in its throat. Both froze, listening. The distinctive sound of a horse approaching broke the silence. "Too late," Sam muttered, reaching for his rifle. "Get your things. If it's Brock, we leave now through the back." Penelope gathered her small bundle while Sam extinguished the lamps. In the sudden darkness, his hand found hers, warm and steady. They moved to the rear window, peering out cautiously. A lone rider approached from the east, not the valley entrance where they'd expected trouble. The man rode slowly, as if unconcerned about being seen. "It's not Brock," Sam whispered, "but I don't recognize him." "I do." Penelope's blood ran cold. "It's Edward Wellington, Reginald's brother." Sam's grip on his rifle tightened. "Stay inside." Before she could protest, he slipped out the back door, circling around to approach the rider from behind. Penelope watched through the window as Edward dismounted, oblivious to Sam's approach until the rifle barrel pressed against his back. "That's far enough," Sam's voice carried in the still evening air. Edward raised his hands slowly. "I'm unarmed. I'm looking for Penelope Zimmerman. There's no one here by that name." "Please." Edward's voice held genuine distress. "I'm alone. I need to warn her." Penelope hesitated only briefly before stepping onto the porch. "I'm here, Edward." Sam kept his rifle trained on the man as Penelope approached. Edward looked exhausted, his usually impeccable appearance marred by travel dirt and stubble. "Penelope, thank God." Relief flooded his features. "Reginald sent Brock to bring you back, but not for reconciliation." "I never thought it was," she replied coldly. "What does he want?" "Your silence. Permanently." Edward glanced at Sam, then back to her. "I found his correspondence. He instructed Brock to stage an accident once he found you. He can't risk you testifying about his business dealings." Sam's expression darkened. "What business dealings?" "My brother has been moving counterfeit currency through his banks," Edward explained. "Penelope discovered it. That's why she really ran, isn't it?" Penelope nodded slowly. "I found the ledgers. When I confronted him, he—" Her hand went instinctively to her cheek, where a faded bruise still lingered beneath the tan she'd acquired. "He made it clear what would happen if I spoke to anyone. I believed him when he said you'd stolen from us," Edward continued, "until I found Brock's payment twice the amount for a simple retrieval, and instructions about making sure you couldn't talk." Sam lowered his rifle slightly. "Why are you helping her? He's your brother." "Because my brother is not the man I thought he was." Edward's voice hardened. "And because no one deserves what he planned for Penelope." They brought Edward inside, where he shared what he knew. Brock was less than a day behind him, having tracked Penelope to the nearest town. "He knows you're in this valley somewhere," Edward told them. "It won't take him long to find this place." "We were already planning to leave," Sam said, pouring coffee for all three. First light. Edward shook his head. That may be too late. Brock rides at night when he's close to his quarry. Penelope and Sam exchanged glances. Then we leave now, she said. There's another option. Edward reached into his coat, producing a packet of papers. Affidavits from bank employees, evidence of Reginald's crimes. If Penelope takes these to the federal authorities in Denver, it would be Reginald facing arrest, not her. Hope flared briefly in Penelope's chest before reality extinguished it. It would be my word against his, a Wellington against a woman who ran away. Not just your word. Edward tapped the papers. Mine too. I've signed my own statement. Sam watched the exchange thoughtfully. You'd testify against your own brother? I've spent my life believing in family loyalty above all else, Edward replied. But there are lines that shouldn't be crossed. Reginald crossed them all. He turned to Penelope. I can't undo what he did to you. But I can try to make it right. Penelope felt tears threaten for the first time since her escape. Edward had always been kind to her, but she'd never expected this level of support. Thank you. Sam cleared his throat. This changes things. If Brock is after both of you now... He doesn't know I'm involved yet, Edward interrupted. But he will when Reginald realizes I've gone. We need to move quickly. They formed a plan. Edward would take the evidence to Denver immediately, traveling south to avoid Brock. Penelope and Sam would head northwest as originally planned, leaving a false trail to the east to confuse their pursuer. As Edward prepared to leave, Penelope embraced him. Be careful. Reginald won't forgive this betrayal. Some betrayals are actually acts of conscience, he replied quietly. I should have stood up to him years ago. After Edward departed, Sam and Penelope finished their preparations in tense silence. The night was clear and cold, stars brilliant overhead as they led their horses from the barn. Sam took a final look at his cabin. 5 years, he murmured. Penelope touched his arm gently. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. He covered her hand with his own. Some things matter more than a place. They rode out under cover of darkness, Sam leading them along a deer trail that skirted the edge of the valley before climbing into the foothills. By dawn, they had covered nearly 15 miles, the cabin long out of sight behind them. As they paused to rest the horses, Sam pointed ahead to where mountains rose in jagged silhouette against the brightening sky. There's an old mining trail through there, hardly used now. It'll take us to Pinecrest. Your friend's settlement? Penelope asked, stretching her stiff limbs. Jesse Peterson. We served together in the war. Sam offered her a canteen. He married a widow with a small ranch. Good people. Penelope drank gratefully. And after that? Where will you go? Sam studied her for a long moment. Depends on what happens with your testimony. And what you want. The simple statement hung between them, laden with unspoken possibilities. Penelope found herself unable to respond, caught between the uncertainty of her future and the growing certainty of her feelings for this man who had risked everything to help her. They continued riding, the terrain growing steeper as they entered the mountains. Sam pointed out landmarks as they traveled a distinctive rock formation, a stream that never ran dry even in drought years, the ruins of an old mining camp. His knowledge of the land was intimate, his respect for it evident in every observation. By midday, they had climbed high enough to look back across the valley. Sam reined in his horse, gazing toward where his cabin lay, now just a tiny speck in the distance. Look, Penelope said suddenly, pointing to a plume of smoke rising from the valley floor. Sam's jaw tightened. That's no cooking fire. They watched in silence as black smoke billowed upward. Even from miles away, there was no mistaking what was happening. Sam's cabin was burning. Brock, Penelope whispered, sick with guilt. He found it. And now he knows we've gone. Sam's voice was flat, but she could see the grief in his eyes as he watched flames consume everything he'd built. "We need to keep moving." They rode harder after that, pushing through the afternoon without stopping. The trail narrowed, winding through pine forests and across rocky slopes. Sam set a pace that was demanding but not reckless, always mindful of the horse's limits. As dusk approached, they reached a small plateau sheltered by overhanging rock. "We'll camp here," Sam decided. "There's water nearby, and it's defensible." They worked together silently, tending to the horses before establishing their simple camp. Sam built a small fire, kept low and shielded to prevent the light from being visible from below. Penelope prepared a meal from their provisions while he scouted the surrounding area. When he returned, they ate without speaking, each lost in their own thoughts. The mountain night was cold, stars brilliant in the black sky above. Penelope wrapped a blanket tighter around her shoulders, watching Sam stare into the dying embers of their fire. "I'm sorry about your home," she said finally. He looked up, his expression unreadable in the flickering light. "It was just a cabin." "It was more than that." She moved closer, settling beside him. "It was your life." Sam sighed, running a hand through his beard. "A life can be rebuilt. Not everything in it." "No," he agreed. "Not everything." He turned to her, his eyes reflecting the last of the firelight. "But maybe that's not always bad. Sometimes what comes next is better." Penelope felt her breath catch at the intensity of his gaze. "You can't know that. I can hope." His voice was low, almost gentle. "I stopped hoping for a long time, Penelope. Just existed. Until you arrived half dead on my doorstep. And now your home is ashes because of me. My home was already empty." He reached out slowly, his calloused fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I didn't realize how empty until recently." The moment stretched between them, taut with possibility. Penelope found herself leaning toward him, drawn by something stronger than caution. A distant sound shattered the moment, the unmistakable echo of a gunshot rolling across the mountains. They sprang apart, instantly alert. Sam extinguished what remained of their fire while Penelope gathered their essentials. "Could be hunters," Sam whispered, though neither of them believed it. "Or Brock," she replied. They spent an anxious night, taking turns keeping watch. No further sounds disturbed the darkness, but dawn brought fresh worry. Low clouds had moved in, bringing with them a fine, cold rain that reduced visibility and made the trail treacherous. "2 more days to Pinecrest," Sam said as they saddled the horses, "if the weather holds." It didn't. By midday, the rain had intensified, turning the narrow trail into a muddy slide. They were forced to dismount and lead the horses through the most difficult sections. Progress slowed to a painful crawl. Penelope's arm ached from the old wound, and she could see the concern in Sam's eyes each time he glanced back at her. Near dusk, with the rain still falling steadily, Sam stopped suddenly, holding up his hand for silence. Penelope froze, straining to hear over the patter of raindrops on leaves. Then she caught it, the distant sound of hooves on stone, moving fast. Sam pulled her off the trail, leading the horses into a dense stand of pines. They crouched there, soaked and shivering, as the sounds grew closer. Through gaps in the foliage, Penelope saw 3 riders pass Brock in the lead, his scar livid against his pale face, followed by 2 rough-looking men she didn't recognize. They rode with purpose, following the same trail Sam and Penelope had been traveling. "Hired guns," Sam breathed when they had passed. "He's serious about finding you." "What do we do now?" "They're between us and Pinecrest." Sam considered for a moment. "There's another way. Longer, harder terrain. But Brock won't know it." They waited until full dark before emerging from hiding, then turned onto a barely visible game trail that climbed steeply away from their original route. The rain had stopped, but the ground remained treacherous. They traveled slowly, with only occasional moonlight breaking through the clouds to guide them. By midnight, they had reached a ridgeline high above their previous path. Below, they could see the faint glow of a campfire where Brock and his men had stopped for the night. They think they're ahead of us, Penelope realized. Sam nodded. And we need to keep it that way. No fire tonight. They made cold camp in a small cave, sharing jerky and hard biscuits. Exhaustion made Penelope's hands clumsy as she tried to wring water from her sodden clothes. Here, Sam said, offering her a dry shirt from his pack. It's not much, but it's better than what you're wearing. She accepted gratefully, turning away to change. The shirt enveloped her, still carrying the scent of his cabin smoke and pine, and something indefinably him. She breathed it in, finding unexpected comfort in the familiarity. When she turned back, Sam had spread their blankets a respectable distance apart, and was examining a crude map he'd sketched in the dirt. If we keep to this ridge, he explained, we can cut across to Broken Arrow Pass. It's rough going, but it will put us behind Pinecrest. We can approach from the north, where they won't be watching. Penelope studied the map, impressed by his knowledge of the terrain. How long? 3 days, maybe 4 with the ground so wet. He glanced up at her. Can you make it? She straightened her shoulders. I've come this far. A smile touched his lips, brief but genuine. That you have. They settled onto their respective blankets, the small cave providing minimal shelter but welcome protection from the wind. Despite her exhaustion, Penelope found sleep elusive. She was acutely aware of Sam just a few feet away, his breathing steady in the darkness. Sam, she whispered finally. Thank you. For everything. There was a pause before he responded, his voice soft. Get some sleep, Penelope. Long day tomorrow. She did sleep eventually, dreaming of burning cabins and endless trails that led nowhere. When she woke before dawn, she found Sam already up, his blanket folded neatly. Weather's clearing, he reported. We should move while we have good light. The day proved grueling. The ridge narrowed in places to a knife's edge, requiring careful navigation. Their horses, sure-footed but tired, needed frequent rest. By late afternoon, when they finally descended to more level ground, both humans and animals were near exhaustion. They made camp in a sheltered valley, risking a small fire to dry their still damp clothing and warm some coffee. As darkness fell, Penelope found herself studying Sam openly for the first time since they'd fled his cabin. The journey had taken its toll on him, too. His beard was wilder, his face leaner, lines of fatigue etched around his eyes. Yet there was a vitality to him, an undiminished strength that drew her. You're staring, he said, without looking up from tending the fire. Penelope didn't look away. I'm wondering. About? What happens after? She pulled her knees to her chest. If Edward succeeds, if Reginald is arrested. What then? Sam added another stick to the fire. What do you want to happen? It was a simple question with a complicated answer. Before meeting Sam, Penelope's only goal had been escape from Reginald, from St. Louis, from the suffocating life she'd been trapped in. Now, new possibilities were taking shape in her mind. I don't know exactly, she admitted. Not San Francisco anymore, I think. Somewhere. She hesitated. Somewhere I could build something of my own. Sam looked up then, his eyes reflecting the firelight. Like a cabin in a valley? Perhaps. She held his gaze. What about you? What will you do? Start over. He poked at the embers. Find a new valley. Build a new cabin. Alone? The question hung between them. Sam set aside the stick and moved around the fire until he was seated beside her. That depends, he said quietly. On what? On whether someone might want to build something together. Penelope's heart thundered in her chest. Someone might. Sam's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. For a long moment neither spoke, the simple contact saying more than words could. When he finally leaned toward her, Penelope met him halfway. The kiss was gentle, questioning. A beginning rather than a culmination. His beard was soft against her skin, his lips warm despite the mountain chill. When they parted, his eyes searched hers, finding whatever answer he sought. "We should rest," he said, though he made no move to release her hand. Still a long way to go. That night their blankets were spread closer together, and when Penelope woke shivering in the pre-dawn chill, Sam's arm slipped around her, drawing her against his warmth without a word. She slept more soundly than she had in months. The next 2 days brought them through increasingly difficult terrain, climbing higher into the mountains before descending toward Broken Arrow Pass. They saw no further sign of Brock and his men, but remained vigilant, traveling mainly in the early morning and late evening when visibility was poor. On the afternoon of the third day, they crested a final ridge and looked down on a green valley nestled among pine-covered hills. A cluster of buildings marked the settlement of Pinecrest, smoke rising from chimneys against the clear autumn sky. "There it is," Sam said, relief evident in his voice. "Jesse's place is on the far side, that ranch with the red barn." Penelope stared at the peaceful scene below, struck by a sudden realization. "I've never had a home like that. A real home, I mean." Sam glanced at her. "Your family in St. Louis was wealthy but cold, and with Reginald." She shook her head. "It was a prison disguised as a mansion." "What about your parents?" "Dead since I was 16. My uncle arranged my marriage to Reginald when I was 18. She smiled bitterly. "A beneficial connection for both families. No one asked what I wanted." Sam's face softened with understanding. "And what do you want, Penelope?" She looked from the valley back to him, this man who had lost everything to help her, who had shown her kindness without condition, who looked at her as if she were something precious rather than something owned. "Something real," she said simply. They approached Pinecrest cautiously, circling around to enter from the north as planned. The settlement was larger than Penelope had expected, perhaps 30 buildings including a general store, church, and what appeared to be a small hotel. People moved about their business, nodding to each other in the easy manner of a close-knit community. Sam led them directly to the ranch he had indicated, where a tall man with graying hair was mending a corral fence. He looked up as they approached, his weathered face breaking into a grin of recognition. "Sam Nash, as I live and breathe." He set down his tools and strode to meet them. "Thought you were determined to be a hermit for the rest of your days." Sam dismounted, clasping the man's hand warmly. "Plans change, Jesse. This is Penelope Zimmerman. Penelope, Jesse Peterson." Jesse tipped his hat to her. "Madam, any friend of Sam's is welcome here." "Thank you, Mr. Peterson." "Just Jesse, please." He turned back to Sam. "You both look like you've had a rough journey. Come inside. Martha will be beside herself to have company." Martha Peterson proved to be a robust woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She took one look at the travel-worn pair and immediately set about arranging hot baths, clean clothes, and a substantial meal. Penelope found herself whisked away to the washroom while the men tended to the horses. "You'll feel human again after a proper soak," Martha declared, pouring steaming water into a large copper tub. "I've laid out some of my daughter's things. She's away teaching in Denver, but she won't mind." The luxury of the bath was almost overwhelming after days of hard travel. Penelope scrubbed away dirt and worry, letting the hot water ease her aching muscles. The borrowed dress that followed was simple but clean, the first feminine clothing she'd worn since fleeing St. Louis. When she emerged, she found Sam similarly transformed. He had trimmed his beard and changed into clean clothes borrowed from Jesse. His hair, still damp from his own bath, curled slightly at the nape of his neck. He looked up as she entered the kitchen, his expression warming in a way that made her cheeks flush. Over dinner, they explained their situation to the Petersons' Penelope's escape, the bounty hunter, Edward's evidence, and the burning of Sam's cabin. Jessie listened gravely. Brock's got a reputation. He's killed before and claimed self-defense. Courts usually believe him. That's why we avoided the main trails, Sam explained. But he knows we're headed somewhere, and Pinecrest is the nearest settlement to my place. You think he'll come here? Martha asked, concern evident. Eventually, Sam confirmed. Which is why we can't stay long. Just until we hear from Edward or get word about what's happening in Denver. Jesse exchanged glances with his wife. You'll stay as long as needed. We've got the room. And plenty of hands to keep watch. Their generosity brought tears to Penelope's eyes. We've put you at risk just by coming here. Martha reached across the table to pat her hand. Honey, Jesse and Sam fought side by side through the war. That makes you family as far as we're concerned. Later, shown to separate rooms in the ranch house, Penelope paused at her door. Do you think Edward made it to Denver? Sam leaned against the wall, considering. If he took the southern route, he should have arrived days ago. Now it depends on whether the authorities believe him. And if they don't? Then we keep running. His eyes held hers steadily. Together. The simple declaration settled something within her. Whatever came next, she would not face it alone. Good night, Sam. Good night, Penelope. Days passed at the Peterson ranch, a welcome respite after their ordeal. Penelope helped Martha with household tasks, while Sam worked alongside Jesse and his ranch hands. In the evenings, they gathered in the comfortable parlor, sharing stories and occasional laughter. For the first time in years, Penelope felt herself relaxing, beginning to believe in the possibility of a future unmarked by fear. The bond between her and Sam deepened during these quiet days. They rarely spoke of what had passed between them on the mountain, but something had changed. Their glances lingered, their hands found excuses to touch. When they walked together in the evening, his hand often found the small of her back, a gentle pressure that spoke of protection and belonging. A week after their arrival, Jesse returned from town with news. Telegraph came in, he announced at dinner. Arrests in St. Louis. Some banker named Wellington and several associates, charged with counterfeiting and fraud. Penelope's hand flew to her mouth. Reginald, they actually arrested him? Jesse nodded, unfolding a paper from his pocket. Message is from a U.S. Marshal office in Denver. Says a Mr. Edward Wellington provided evidence that led to the arrests. Also says. He glanced at Sam. Says the witness Penelope Zimmerman is no longer sought for theft, as all charges have been dropped. Relief crashed over her like a wave, leaving her trembling. It's over? Seems so. Jesse handed her the telegram. Marshal wants you to come to Denver when possible to give your formal statement, but there's no rush now. That night, Penelope stood on the porch of the Peterson home, staring up at stars that suddenly seemed brighter than before. Freedom, true freedom, was finally within her grasp. No more running, no more fear. The future stretched before her, unlimited for the first time in her adult life. She heard Sam's footsteps before she saw him, the now familiar cadence of his walk a comfort in itself. Couldn't sleep? He asked, joining her at the railing. Too much thinking. She smiled up at him. Good thinking, though. About Denver? About after Denver. She turned to face him fully. About what comes next. Sam's eyes reflected the starlight as he studied her. And what does come next, Penelope? I don't know exactly, but I know what I want. She stepped closer to him. I want something real, something I build myself, with my own hands. A home that's truly mine. That's a good dream. It's better as a shared one. She took a deep breath. I don't need San Francisco anymore. I don't need to run so far. What I need? She reached for his hand. What I need is someone to build with. Someone who sees me as I am. Sam's fingers tightened around hers. I see you. I know you do. She moved closer still, until she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cool night air. That's why I'm asking if you meant what you said on the mountain, about building something together. For answer, he drew her into his arms, one hand cradling her face with infinite tenderness. I meant every word. Their kiss beneath the stars was a promise, a beginning. When they finally parted, Penelope rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I love you, he murmured into her hair. Didn't expect to ever say those words again. She looked up, seeing the emotion in his eyes honest and unguarded. I love you too. I think I have since you caught me falling from my horse. He laughed softly. That was quite an entrance. It got your attention. That it did. They remained on the porch until the chill drove them inside, talking quietly of possibilities: a new cabin, perhaps, or a small ranch of their own. Somewhere with room to grow, to build, to heal. 3 days later, a rider approached the Peterson ranch at dusk. Penelope was helping Martha prepare dinner when Jesse called for Sam to join him outside. Through the window, she watched the men speak with the newcomer, their expressions growing serious. When Sam came to find her, his face was grim. Brock, he said simply. He's in town, asking questions. Knows we're in the area. Penelope's newfound peace shattered. How? We were so careful. Someone recognized your description, or mine. He ran a hand through his hair. Doesn't matter now. Jesse's gathering some men to confront him, tell him to move on. No. Fear clutched at her heart. Brock won't back down. He's killed before. This isn't his territory, and the law's on our side now. He doesn't care about the law. She gripped his arm. We should leave, Sam. Tonight. But it was too late. As darkness fell, the sound of multiple riders approaching reached them. Jesse grabbed his shotgun, positioning himself at the front door. Sam drew Penelope away from the windows, his own rifle ready. Martha, take Penelope to the back room, Jesse ordered. No. Penelope stood firm. This is my fight too. Sam looked at her, seeing the determination in her eyes, and nodded. Stay behind me. The riders, 4 men including Brock, stopped in the yard. In the lantern light, Penelope could see the bounty hunter's scarred face, his cold eyes scanning the house. Nash, he called out. I know you're in there. Send out the woman, and we'll call it square. Jesse stepped onto the porch, shotgun visible but not raised. You're trespassing, Brock. The lady's not going anywhere with you. I've got papers. Those papers are worthless now. Sam's voice rang out as he joined Jesse. Wellington's been arrested. The theft charges were dropped. Brock's face twisted in disbelief. You're lying. Telegraph came 3 days ago. Jesse held his ground. U.S. Marshal in Denver confirmed it. Whatever Wellington paid you, you won't be collecting. Brock's companions shifted uncomfortably, looking to their leader. For a moment, Penelope dared to hope they would simply leave. Then Brock's hand moved to his holster. I don't walk away empty-handed, he snarled. Woman cost me a month's tracking and a reputation. She's coming with me, one way or another. What happened next unfolded with terrible swiftness. Brock drew his pistol, but before he could aim, Sam's rifle cracked. The bounty hunter jerked, clutching his shoulder, his own shot going wide. His companions reached for their weapons, only to find themselves facing not just Sam and Jesse, but half a dozen ranch hands who emerged from the shadows, all armed. It's over, Brock, Sam called out, rifle still trained on the wounded man. Ride away while you still can. For a tense moment, Penelope thought the men would fight. Then one of Brock's companions leaned over to speak urgently in his ear. Whatever he said must have been persuasive, for the bounty hunter slowly lowered his weapon. "This isn't finished," he growled, blood seeping between the fingers pressed to his shoulder. "Yes, it is," Jesse replied evenly. "Unless you want to be buried here." The standoff held for another breathless moment before Brock finally signaled his men to withdraw. They backed their horses slowly from the yard, Brock's hateful gaze fixed on the house until they disappeared into the darkness. Only when the sound of hooves had faded completely did Penelope realize she had been holding her breath. Her legs suddenly weak, she sank onto a chair as relief, and delayed fear washed over her. Sam was at her side in an instant, kneeling before her. "Are you all right?" She nodded, unable to speak, her hand finding his and holding tight. Jesse posted men to watch through the night, but Brock and his companions didn't return. By morning, word came from town that they had been seen riding east, away from Pinecrest. "He's giving up," Martha said confidently as she served breakfast. "Man knows when he's beaten." Penelope wasn't so certain. "He seemed like someone who holds grudges." "Probably does," Jesse agreed. "But he's also practical. No money in coming after you now, and too many guns standing in his way." Sam remained silent through this exchange, his expression thoughtful. After breakfast, he drew Penelope outside for a private conversation. "I think we should go to Denver," he said without preamble. "Give your statement as the marshal requested. Make everything official. And then? And then we decide." His eyes held hers. Where to build. How to start over. Hope bloomed anew in her chest. Together? Together. He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "If that's still what you want." "It is." She stepped closer. "More than anything." 2 days later, they departed for Denver, traveling with a freight wagon for added security. The journey was uneventful, the autumn weather holding clear and crisp. In Denver, Penelope gave her formal statement to the authorities, describing Reginald's counterfeiting operation in detail. She learned that Edward had returned to St. Louis to manage the family business in his brother's absence, working to make restitution to those who had been defrauded. To her surprise, she also learned that as Reginald's wife, she was entitled to a portion of his legitimate assets, not a fortune, but enough to start a new life. When the marshal handed her the bank draft, Sam squeezed her hand in silent support. "What will you do now, Mrs. Wellington?" the marshal asked as they prepared to leave. Penelope glanced at Sam before answering. "It's Miss Zimmerman, and we're going to build a home." They were married 2 days later in a simple ceremony at Denver's small Episcopal church. Martha had insisted on altering one of her daughter's dresses into a suitable wedding gown, and Jesse stood as Sam's best man. It was nothing like the elaborate society wedding she had endured with Reginald, and all the more meaningful for its simplicity. "Mrs. Nash," Sam murmured when they were alone that evening in the modest hotel room they had taken. "How does it sound?" "Like freedom," Penelope replied, drawing him close. "Like home." They returned to Pinecrest long enough to gather supplies and say proper goodbyes to the Petersons. With the money from Penelope's settlement, they purchased land 50 miles west, a sheltered valley with good water and grazing land, similar in many ways to the home Sam had lost, but with its own character and possibilities. Through the winter, they stayed in a one-room cabin hastily constructed before the first snow. It was cramped and drafty, nothing like the fine homes Penelope had known in St. Louis, but filled with a warmth no mansion had ever provided. They planned their ranch together, Sam teaching Penelope about cattle and horses, she contributing ideas from books and her own practical sense. When spring came, they began building in earnest, first a proper cabin, then outbuildings, corrals, and fences. Penelope worked alongside Sam, learning to handle tools, to split logs, to create something lasting with her own hands. By summer, they had acquired a small herd of cattle and 3 additional horses. By autumn, their cabin was finished, complete with a stone fireplace that Sam had labored over for weeks to get just right. Standing before that fireplace on the first truly cold evening of fall, Penelope looked around the home they had created, simple but solid, built to withstand whatever came their way. Outside, the last light caught the mountains in gold, the valley spread below like a promise. Sam came to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist, his chin resting on her head. Happy? Very. She leaned back against him. I was just thinking. About? About names. She turned in his embrace to face him. For the ranch. And maybe. She took his hand, guiding it to rest against her abdomen, still flat but harboring their secret. For other things, too. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by a joy so intense it took her breath away. Penelope, are you? She nodded, laughing as he lifted her off her feet in an exuberant embrace. When he set her down, his eyes were suspiciously bright. When? Spring, I think. She touched his face. A good time for new beginnings. That night, as they lay together in the warmth of their bed, Sam's hand protectively covering the place where their child grew, Penelope reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a prison of wealth and cruelty to this simple cabin in a remote valley. From a woman desperate enough to risk death rather than remain captive to a woman who had helped build her own freedom, log by log, day by day. She had tried to escape her old life. The cowboy had built her a new one instead. But the truth, she realized now, was that they had built it together, this home, this love, this future stretching before them like the valley below their mountain. What are you thinking about? Sam murmured, half asleep beside her. Penelope smiled in the darkness, her hand finding his. About how sometimes you have to run away to find your way home. Their daughter was born as the first wildflowers bloomed across the valley, a healthy child with her father's dark hair and her mother's determined spirit. They named her Sarah, in honor of the woman Sam had loved and lost, a bridge between past and future. By the child's first birthday, their ranch, which they eventually named New Beginning, had grown to include 100 head of cattle, a vegetable garden that was Penelope's pride, and the foundation for a larger home to accommodate their expanding family. Sometimes, in quiet moments, Penelope would take out the locket she had risked everything to keep, the one containing a faded portrait of her mother. She would show it to little Sarah, telling her stories not of escape and fear, but of courage and possibility. Of how sometimes the end of one story is merely the first page of another, better one. And in the evenings, when the work was done and their daughter slept peacefully, Penelope and Sam would sit on their porch, watching the sun set behind mountains that no longer represented barriers, but instead stood as silent witnesses to the life they had built. A life neither had imagined possible before a desperate woman on a stolen horse had arrived at a lonely cabin, changing everything. No regrets? Sam would sometimes ask, though he already knew the answer. And Penelope, looking at the home they had created together, not just the buildings and the land, but the love and trust and hope, would always give the same reply. Not a single one.